Happy Friday, everybody. Good morning. Welcome to another edition of Let's Build Some Properties with Matthew Ruxton. How you doing, man?
I'm doing good. How are you, Chris?
I am fantastic. Looks like I just got the go live button transition just perfectly. So I'm off to a great start this Friday. Always excited to talk about one of the basic, maybe the most basic functionality of HubSpot properties that so many people are having trouble with as we move towards everything is an object. Land can't get there fast enough, but on the way, we've got some pretty bad habits is the right word, but definitely some workarounds that need to be unraveled. And I remember back when I guess my first official property syncing, workaround was when I was trying to install like Quiller in 2019, and I couldn't get any of the information I needed from the company or contact because everything was syncing with the deal. So I had to copy all of the contact information. And luckily, I never had to worry about two deals being in play for the same company or contact because it wouldn't have worked on the second one. Uh, yeah, so now there's a portal out there that has a bunch of those properties on a deal that we really don't need anymore. So,
Yeah,
we've talked about this a little bit, but you said you kind of just went through this process with your team,
yeah,
and
yeah.
how did you
It's one of those things
how did you
that
approach
really,
the syncing? We got new sync properties, we've got association label or association property list cards. Lots to choose from now. How do we choose?
I think it ultimately comes down to how you're using your data. And I think there's two sides to the conversation because there's the how am I reporting on my data? How am I using my data? How am I actioning my data? And where does that data need to live in order to make that effective? And a lot of people, I think it's very easy. Like HubSpot has given us essentially many ways to do the things very different ways. Like you could have a single object report and have all your data on one object. But that means that data's got to be up to date. Or you have a multi-object report where your data is spread across things. So then what happens when you have data that's not the same on different reports, different objects? So I think it's a good conversation to have as an admin when you think about how am I making sure that my team's entering data in the right place? How am I making sure that the team's entering the correct data in the right place and that data is being updated for the right teams? And something we just went through this process at my company where we kind of stepped back and said, let's just look at what's getting pushed around. And we kind of laid out, and it was a horrible, horrible Google sheet. It was like all our core objects. And it was like, let me just pull an export of every properties, which by the way, you can't do really easily. If anyone knows that, HubSpot, please make exporting properties a lot easier. We essentially wrote everything out and was like, here's the things that are on the same properties on multiple objects. And we kind of talked about, okay, where are we entering this information for the first time and who's going to use it again? And it was a very cathartic experience because we actually got rid of a lot of properties. There was like properties we were storing and I'm like, we're filling this property. We use it in 0 reports. Like, why are we even collecting it? Because we can? Like, that's not a great reason. So we got rid of a couple properties, but we started to think about, okay, now that we've decided which properties are going to be most important, the next step was who's going to update them and when are they going to update them? Because that differentiates when you're going to either create two properties and have some form of workflow sync running between the two, or you're going to use something like property sync, which came out, I think now it's been about a month and a half since I kind of like fully publicly launched. It's been in beta for a little bit longer than that, but
Well,
doesn't seem interesting.
it was my first show on March 18th. So it
Oh,
has
dang,
come a
it's
long
been
way
that
since
long.
then. Yeah.
So much comes out with HubSpot. I have no clue like the time frames anymore.
Right.
But when you're using that property sync function, it's great because it moves that data, it keeps it in one place and puts it somewhere else, and you can still use it. You can still action on it. You can filter by it. You can use it in index pages. You can see it. And I think that's huge, but you can't edit it. And that is something that some of my teams have a real issue with because we have multiple teams in our go-to-market process where sales teams are collecting data. They might collect something like an assessment piece of data like this school uses this assessment piece. And then our operations team, who's actually implementing the customer, might find, oh yeah, no, we just changed. We're now using this assessment criteria, not this one. And they'll update it. So property sync doesn't work for us there because like we have those two change. So we are trying, it was like, how do we, property sync wouldn't work for us in that situation because we need to update it. And that's when you look at the third option, which is associated cards. Because associated record cards, I think that's the right term. Association, association record cards.
Associated property list cards.
There we go. It's
Yeah.
like, it's got a longer name. Gives you that ability to update the data somewhere else and not have it be in two places at once. And I think that's where the power in that function really lives, is that you can have teams that work inside of one object. Like you may have a service team that's working inside tickets, but they can go to a card and they can see, oh, the customer calls. Like the best example I think I can give is you're a service tech and you're answering a customer call about an issue with like a printer or something like that. And they pull up the ticket and they're like, oh, we need to ship you a new printer. Well, I see your address is, 123 Main Street, Alabama. And they go, well, no, we're actually not there. We've moved to like 246 3rd Street. They can update that company information in that center card. And it's updating it on the company. It's not creating another property. It's not storing it somewhere else. You have to sync it later. Like it's getting updated where it needs to get updated. And those same rules apply to like who can update it, who can't update it. If you couldn't update companies before, you still can't update companies with this option, but at least you can see it. And I think that's the conversation people need to have now is we've worked around a lot of things. Like we all have everyone's favorite workaround is today's date. When the day today's date comes out, I think we're all going to be super excited and then super bummed at the same time. Because like now we've got to work back everything that we built to make today's date happen. But I think it's really important to take that step back and say, let's go back and see, okay, now that property sync here is here, now that association cards are here, where do I need to roll back and update my data?
Yeah. And so it sounds like getting to this endpoint of like the right visibility and the right level of, editability. I think like
Yeah.
understanding that like, well, some of the workarounds, have definitely been reporting related and maybe
Yeah.
integration related in the past. Like a lot of them are just like, hey, I want the team to be working from this one spot. We can't have them clicking around in the different
Yeah.
records, so we're gonna put this data here. Now this property, even though it's natively showing up over here too, like this version of the property is gonna be like the
Yeah.
source of truth. And that address thing is so common. I think because it's been so, it was basically impossible to create a standardized way to handle addresses,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Which means we all do it in a bunch of different ways. And now that we actually get to the point where the association labels exist, it's it's a little bit mind-boggling that we can't kind of see the power of parent and child companies,
Mhm.
and how we should be able to just like any kind of, I want to see the world where it's like any address only lives in those places, because if you can do that, it moves us away from like, okay, we only want one company. Like we're not even going to deal with child companies. We're going to make other
Yeah.
objects that represent places that have addresses. And it's
Yeah.
just like we miss out on the superpower of things like companies and all the roll up stuff that's just automatic, somewhat
Yeah.
automatic. Feels like stuff like that can get better, but as you create custom object, as you create all these workarounds, you lose out on so much of what the system is trying to do for you.
Yeah. And I think that's a really valid point is people are often, they get super stoked. They go ahead, buy something enterprise. And like, I can build custom objects. And they'll build something that's literally just a duplicate of an existing core object. And you're like, you could just use tickets. Like you didn't need a custom object for that. You could just use tickets. And you're going to lose out on all this like SLA reporting, especially with tickets. Like I think that's the common one I see the most is people rebuild a ticket pipeline in a custom object. And they're like, you can just use tickets. Like you could have used tickets and you got all this custom standard SLA. You have now help desk, which is replacing inbox. You have all this functionality that's built into tickets around tickets, and you went and built a custom object. I'm like, that's a weird way to go. Like create more work and not get the ability to come back out and change it, and not to deviate away from properties for a second, but we have a couple custom objects that we've built, and they just, I think it was 2 or 3 days ago, they turned on pipeline rules and pipeline tags for custom objects. So now you can do a lot of the same functionality you can do in like tickets and deals previously. Now you can do inside of custom objects, which is awesome. It's a great feature. Um, but to that point, though, it's already existed in tickets for at least 7 to 8 months now. Like you could have been doing this already, and I have so many workarounds. I had workarounds built to prevent people moving things to the next stage with out of order, involving like workflows that fill property dates that like when you exit this stage, fill this property and like all that sort of stuff. And I was like, well, I get to rip that out. Like it's still good for data, but like at least I don't have to make it this like awkward thing where I have to tell my sales team, hey, this property here you can't edit and it has to be filled in. And they're like, but how do I fill it in? I'm like, follow the process. That's how it gets filled in. So and like, what does
uh,
exited stage two mean? I'm like, exactly what you think it does.
yeah.
Please follow the process. But
So
those are the things that are nuts. And I think that it's very easy for us to build, it's very easy for us to go hunt for zebras. This is a phrase that stuck with me for the longest time. It was like my first tech job. They're like, when you hear hoof prints, think horses, not zebras. And it's very easy for us as admins to like go the zebra route. And let's create this really complex like workflow that's going to make a workaround. And it triggers this other workflow and another object. And I'm like, or you could just sync the data or
yeah,
just tell people to go update it here and just give them an ability to do it faster. I think that is the key thing. And we were talking this before we started, which is it's easier for me as an admin to shoulder some of the pain in the benefit of getting my end users a better experience.
yes, exactly. And that's where like I started cringing a little bit, well, a lot of it last year when I come out of inbound, knowing that like one of the pillars of messaging was customizability and extensibility, and everybody's rejoicing that now we can do almost everything that Salesforce can do, and it's like I don't know if any you guys have seen Salesforce instances, like not always great, like most of the time it's a mess, right? And it's because you could do anything you wanted, right? So it's like
Yeah.
just because you can customize doesn't mean you should.
Right.
So how did you uh like can you highlight like one or two ways you actually, okay, we're gonna not do it this way anymore, we're gonna use this new way of doing it? How did you transition that? Because we know that a common pain is like, okay, I
Change.
can't get rid of any of these properties because they all have data in it, and they're all in these workflows, and they're on these reports, and they're all these places that I got to
Yeah.
detach from. So in reality, I'm just going to let them sit there and make some new stuff. How did you approach
Oh,
that?
I will say that's the pain. I feel like we've all lived that pain of when you're trying to like archive a property. And it's like, no, someone's using it enough you, and you're like, oh, I've got to log in, and I feel bad. I've fortunately been blessed to always have an enterprise portal, so I can log in as users and do this for them. And I've shared this, I think, with the index page team, which is like, please let me as an admin update other people's views because like you don't know how painful it is when you're trying to like remove a duplicate property that should never have existed, and you can't remove it because it's on someone's view. And I'm like, the only option I have is clone and delete, and then even then I own it, and I'm like, I don't want to do this like every
Yeah,
time.
that's the only
And I
reason
have properties that are like
I
they're on like 37 views, and I'm like, it's gonna live forever. I
yeah,
just
that's the only reason I've ever logged in as somebody else is to fix that situation.
yeah,
Um,
all the
so
time. But to back to your question though, which was discussing when we move stuff around. I took an approach of let's see if there's a better way to do it first, and then like let's not try to fix the existing data. Let's keep it for now. And we started a kind of process of like if we were modifying something or we were changing um, how we'd originally store data, we would I'd throw an emoji on the front of that thing with a little like, construction sign, like a little construction basket, because that like was kind of and I would tell our teams like, hey, if you see this, it means we're changing how we're using this property.
that's brilliant.
Just keep that in mind so that when oh, he's going to be changing this soon, like I need to keep an eye on how that changes. And it was a good way for me to track because then I could just filter in a property list properties I'm trying to audit. And I was like, oh, cool, sweet. So the thing that I found was really insightful was looking at who is editing the data and where are they editing it. And that kind of drives like how you're going to modify a property. Now, it's super easy to just say, well, I can create like a property sync value just by creating a second property that's view only and it's updated by a workflow. And every time this every time X is known, update this property, which is great. But at the risk of, if that workflow doesn't run or you have multiple properties in that workflow and something triggers it incorrectly, like that change happens. Um, and you could use association labels to that extent to do that same thing. But what we used to find a lot is we had a lot of properties where I was like, I could just change everything property sync properties, and we'd be good. But there'd be times where someone maybe on our operational team was like, I actually need to update this property. And I don't want to have to then go back to the company and change it because I live in this object. You know, I live in tickets or I live in deals or whatever. I don't have to go back and find it. So we would try to use property sync anytime someone needed to report on something but didn't need to edit it. Versus we would focus more on the let's use two properties and have a one-way sync in a workflow when we needed to edit it and make sure that update gets passed along. And just being very cognizant of it's very easy to fall in a rabbit hole of having many workflows. Like I'm gracious to be at a point where I have, I think, 6 total workflows that deal with data sync that are just those 6 workflows. Um, but of those 6, there's one workflow that's very ugly and it has, I think, 40 groups because it syncs so many properties at once. And it's all properties around like academics, so that, and it's things that we looked at and we're like, these are things we don't change often. But when we do change them, we change them all at once. So it's like, if we're changing them all at once, let's sync them once. And we move that over. But thinking back to the sort of eye-opening thing for me was we were in the process of doing this when property sync was just came out and then associated records were not a thing. So I was like trying to figure out like I want to be able to update it on the company, but I don't really want to create another property. Like they're never going to report on it on this object. It's more that so that when we report it and we use like custom report builder and we're using multi-object reports, people know which state to pull, which address to pull, which school year to pull. Like where are they pulling it from to get the right data and not get a ton of duplicates? Because it's very easy to fall into a duplicate rabbit hole with custom report builder if you're not careful. I've been there this week specifically. So we kind of stepped back. And when that came out, I stumbled across it by accident one day. I was like, what is this? And found it. That's when I said, okay, maybe we just keep it on one property and we let you update it no matter where you are. If you're on our custom object for implementation, you do it there. If you're on tickets, you can do it there and give people the flexibility to update it in real time. And it's not something that we're necessarily syncing by any means. It just means it's centralized in one place. And people know if I need an address, it's going to be on the company record. Or if I need, a job title, it's going to be on contact. It's going to exist in one place. And I think that's a huge benefit to this process of really rolling back the number of properties you have. Because I think it's very easy to, properties are great and they're also terrible. And you can build them way too quickly and you can have way too many very quickly. And recognizing when you have duplicates is sometimes hard to be like, is there a use case here to have a duplicate?
Yeah, no, I think you make some excellent points. And like, it's been fun for me because I haven't had to deal with anything directly. But this rollout has been very interesting of these two things
Yeah.
consecutively. Because like thinking again to systems that usually end up with very poor data sets and poor experiences for the users, things like this come out from HubSpot and people will say, oh, this other system, they've always had that. Like, what took them so long? And it's like, well, in those other systems, you have people seeing data on their screen that they don't know what's generating it. It's not giving them any value because you just made lookup fields all over the place because you
Yeah.
could. And that's where, like, when they started going a little harder on association labels, I kept telling everybody, like, got to figure this stuff out. They're going to keep building towards that because that I think is their answer and a better way to, handle some of those requests that people are
Yeah.
giving. So I have an example that I'd love to walk through with you, and maybe you can
Yeah.
put your admin hat on and ask me some questions.
Man. It's a quiz if I'm ready. Coffee hasn't hit
You're
completely
quizzing
yet.
me. You're like, why the hell are you doing it like this, Chris? Um, so again, I'm stuck on addresses, and I'm gonna be until we standardize our way, out of this mess, right? Because there's a lot of
Right.
this is the difference between like SaaS world. Yeah, you're not shipping stuff all over. A lot less need to have addresses on point,
Yeah.
right? It's okay for you to have everything in a company record. But when we're shipping stuff around, physical addresses, when location matters for any reason, uh, this is a very important piece. And if you get it right, I mean, the kind of personalization and automation you can achieve is pretty amazing. So here, I'm looking at a deal record where the process says, and this is, do as I say, not as I do. There's no data in here. It's closed one. All right. Well,
Boo.
uh, we're testing. So the process goes, okay, the salesperson in this rental process situation is responsible for confirming the address like before we even say we can ship it, right? Because it
Right.
matters how much it's going to cost to ship, and other things come into play. So they're responsible for filling in this part. And I because there's no, like, in this portal, there's not a great strategy employed for child companies yet, right?
Yeah.
Started with temporary shipping address. I made sure to include the word temporary. Like, what we want to be able to draw this information from the companies associated. Having said that, there are cases in this instance where somebody from one of these companies might be staying at a hotel, and you need to get them
Right.
to it at the hotel, and that's not, you don't want to necessarily track that hotel as a company, record in your CRM, probably, unless he's stayed there like 10 times this year, right? Take that into account. So when
Yeah.
sync properties came out, and like the tail end of this is there's a customer facing portal at the end where
Right.
if we can show them expected date, delivery method, all these questions they're definitely going to ask
Hmm.
as they process the order, like where does that need to start, like managing that data in the process, right? And I try to start wherever it gets first created, right? Like the last thing we want to do is create more effort for our team just because uh you know um we're implementing this new tool, right?
Yeah.
uh so if it gets, so on closed one, right, we've got, see a ticket. And again, here's another example, like native orders just came out. I knew it was coming. Until then, without a fully fledged object, I had to serve that with a custom object, right? So this is like
Yeah.
a whole data bucket of properties that are going to have to wind down and do something with. Luckily, I haven't really implemented a lot there because I knew native orders were coming. Um, and then associated that with that, we'll have some deliverables, based on our light items.
Yeah.
So there's already a workflow in place that says create a ticket on closed one deal that is meant for fulfillment, and the person on the fulfillment team is responsible for shipping that out, right? And they're never going to have any contact with the customer.
Right.
So the responsibility lies with the salesperson, the customer point of contact, to ensure that this data is accurate. Um, but if there's any, need to confirm, or I'm trying to ship it, the address isn't right, like the shipper is responsible for making sure it gets to the place it needs to get to. So we've got a couple different people involved in the process, and having these separate places of the records where they work, where the salesperson is in deals, the fulfillment person is in tickets, is really important to kind of keep their workspace clear. So on closed one, since there's already a workflow, these properties just get copied over one time to
Yeah.
the ticket, right? Which is here, right? So now the the shipper comes in and they've got the data they need to ship it, right? Um, but what we have here, and this is what's interesting, like there's some icons I'm about to show, because these are actually sync properties that are
Yeah.
not synced with the deal. they are synced with this deliverable object,
Right.
which we see these icons can't be edited, syncing, right? Syncing with the ticket.
Yeah.
Um, because now the customer point of contact, or this could be somebody who's responsible for the portal, like this is where you confirm what the customer is seeing on the portal is what you want them to be seeing, right?
Yeah.
But it's not necessarily the place where you want to maintain all of this data, because the shipper
Right.
is the person ultimately in charge of making sure, tracking numbers and the data related to the shipment is right.
Yeah.
So we have it moving across these objects, and I think there I highlighted uh workflow, copying one time from deals to tickets,
Yeah.
then tickets syncing with deliverables. Now, uh, maybe that uneditability is important, but maybe it's not.
Yeah.
And if I don't care that it, like, this could just be, the ticket properties, or the ticket properties, right? So if we, customize this record, and let's say we add a card, and we go association, we go create card. I don't know why
I
that's
like to
not
point out I
intuitive
do
for
that thing
me
all
yet.
the time where I click the wrong thing and I'm like, why is it not here?
So we've got this, let's um, say shipping ticket properties or something like that. Is there any other reason that you change, this internal name?
So I have, so my request to HubSpot on that is that like the internal name should match. Like it should take the card name and then switch the internal name to like the card name with the date and time you edited it. Which is what I'm doing now. Is like every time I update it, I update the internal name with like the date. So like I know like this is the last time I touched it. Like I think that was their intention, but like also I'm kind of like, does it really even need an internal name? So because I've questioned that too. I'm like, why do you have an internal name as an option? But I think it's just it's the same reason like we have API names for properties. I feel like it's speaking to a future where you will be able to call these in an API
Yeah.
at
Well,
some
I think
point.
that's where, yeah, there's definitely people doing that where they bring data from other
Yeah.
systems into these center cards. But this is always what I'm just like copying this, paste it here, like every time.
Why can't it
It's
autofill?
right.
It
Right.
autofills in another place in HubSpot.
Yeah.
Why can't it autofill here?
So I'm going to pick tickets here, because what I'm trying to do is show, like, we have, just say tracking number, right? And then we'll say, address, right? And we'll just add those, and we'll bring it up to the top.
I will say that something I think a lot of people don't realize that makes these cards super effective is if you've adopted association labels um, effectively within your organization, you will find that being able to set these cards to specific association labels makes them so much more effective. Because then you can say like this one is like we have this on my in my current implementation where we have a card, two companies. I have like the district and I have a school. But by having the association labels of schools and districts, then I can say on this card, show only these properties because these are relevant for my district. And then on this card, only show these properties because they're relevant for a school. But they're both company association cards. So it kind of, to some extent, it's trained my end users to use association labels better. Because I'm like, you will see what you need to see if you use association labels. And if association label is not there, you get an error message that says like, there's no associated companies and they've sent me tickets. That say like, why is this not working? I'm like, because you don't have any associated companies. I'm like, but I do. And I'm like, but you didn't give them a label.
Yeah,
So
that's
it's
exactly what
a
happened.
sneaky way to train.
Yeah, when I rolled this out, it's like, I've got the data over here. I mean, that's what I learned, and that's what I was like, oh yeah, association labels, baby. Like, this is gonna be so powerful. um, and like right there, like I was like, okay, I'm just gonna add this ticket card, and then I didn't have a ticket associated. So
Yep.
it's not going to show me anything here. But what we have is now, like, so the first time we open this ticket, this delivery tracking number, or I'm sorry, this delivery tracking number is going to be the same as this delivery tracking number. And this is a synced property that was created on the deliverable object. And this is just the same property that is syncing to
Yeah.
over on the ticket object, right? And the cool thing about these is if you have multiple, records that are associated, like this part,
Yeah.
the ability to flip through, especially like when it comes to orders and like contact has ordered multiple times, like you can just flip
Yeah.
through. It gets like I love the execution of this card specifically. But that's where it's literally like maybe there's actual a handoff to customer success, let's say, and they're the ones
Hmm.
making address updates. So they actually need to edit this stuff that's going to be seen in the portal, and this sync stuff isn't going to work for their use case.
Yeah.
So just a few things, to consider here. uh, but it all comes back to process, mapping it out, understanding
100%.
when people need to see stuff, what do they need to do when they see that stuff. Are the customers ever going to see it? Because so much of this is
Yeah.
like just curation of the data in different ways. Like it's okay to show the same property in multiple places, but that's where we ask ourselves, how many versions of that property do we need, like, to be
Right.
able to show it, right? So
And I
what
think that
was
just like comes back to like the data hygiene aspect too. Like 50% of your job as an admin is data hygiene. Like, and people somehow, like, I've come into portals and I'm like, I can tell someone's built some great stuff, but the data is so messed up because they've not built with hygiene in mind. And I think it's really easy. And I mean, I'm grateful for how fast HubSpot develops stuff, but at the same time, it's very easy to get sucked into a new update and not think about, well, if I implement this, what do I need to take down or replace or fix before I implement it so that it works properly? Because I will tell you, like, I've put in changes recently and I'm like, hey, this change is great. And I'll tell one team about it. And then I think about it for a while, and then I'll get an email or a message or a Slack from like a member of our sales team. They're like, I'm putting this data in and it's not going anywhere. And I'm like, that's right, because we changed how we did that and I didn't tell you. So like it's if anything, it's trained me as a person. Like I used to be terrible at documentation. So I used to live in fear that if I wrote things down, I wouldn't have a job. Now I say like having documentation has saved me more than I can say anything else because now I make a habit. I've kind of like built this habit. It's like if I make a change, I go update the documentation because then I can tell people, hey, go check the documentation. And we'll post like major updates, like, hey, this is a big change, just so you're aware of it. But a lot of times the small stuff I just post in there, and then when they come in, I'm like, yeah, on the 11th we changed that to now you don't need to do this anymore because it just keeps me honest in what I'm doing, but also allows my team to go in and see, okay, I'm not sure of this process. Let me go reference it now. We both know people don't go knowledgeably go actually read our documentation. We like to think they do, but we really built it for ourselves. So I built all my documentation selfishly for myself. And I hope that my end users will read it at some point. And I have a couple of end users who have started reading it. I'm like, this is actually really helpful. I'm like, I don't have to come bug you all the time. And I'm like, that was my hope and dream. Um,
Yeah,
but
and
I
that's
think
like,
it's important.
yeah, no, that's a great example because it's like so often like admins or kind of people in charge of a process will get very standoffish and like, you have the doc, go look in the doc, right? And it's like, no, unfortunately the doc will get adopted on their own like volition, right?
Yeah.
And it's going to be like it usually won't happen until it helps them out of a jam because you weren't around and they
Mhm.
really need to, and they're like, oh yeah, I could go look here, right? And that's at least how I've seen help documentation and any kind of how-to videos. That just the key is like it doesn't scale. It's not reasonable to like the training, the knowledge sharing, all that stuff cannot just always be from a one-to-one conversation, live conversation.
Oh yeah,
right? So building out as much other resources as we can, not to replace those one-to-one conversations as when they're
correct.
needed, right? But to be there and start to wean people off of them. Because that, I mean,
Yeah,
that response is beautiful. Like, I don't have to ask, I don't have to bug you all the time. It's
yeah.
like exactly right.
I
So
mean,
well
it didn't
done.
help. The person that told me that I had shared a graph that was like number of tickets submitted, and they were at the top. So it was that may have prompted that. Like I didn't realize I bugged you as much as I do. But I'm like, I'm not mad that you bug me. I'm happy that you're actually asking questions because I'd rather my team feels open to come and ask me a question, even if it's the dumbest question in the world. And like as an admin, I'd be like, why do you not know that? I like the fact that they come and ask because that means they actually care. And like if I can get my team to care about data quality, I've won the war. In my mind,
Yes.
I've won the war of getting them to update the data in the CRM. So, you know, you can try a lot of things, but I found like leading with grace in those situations has helped me more than enough times and being like, hey, here's the answer. And next time, here's a reference you can go to, which has this stored. And then when one of your colleagues asks a question, you can refer them to that too. So I think that there's a lot to be said about if you take the time to plan out your properties and then you take the time to document why you did it a certain way, it makes a huge deal. Like we've just started to adopt commenting in reports and dashboards because a lot of our team didn't even know it existed. They're like, I didn't even know that was a thing. And I'm like, it's great because you can tag me and stuff. And you can say, hey, this is not working right. And I don't have to play this game where you go, this report's not working. And you send me a screenshot of just the graph. So I can't tell which graph, what page, what dashboard, what report. It's just like this tiny little graph. And I'm like, cool. Which report is this on? Like, and then they
Almost.
send me the dashboard link with 40 reports. And I'm like, that's not helpful. I'm like, just comment on it and then I will come fix it. And that has saved me a countless back and forths in Slack and email. But I think that being accessible, but also being mindful of the documentation you create is huge. And there was a point in my time where I was very like, no, just go read the document. Like, you don't need to ask me this question. Go read the document. And now I'm just like, some of the best relationships I have with my end users are the people that do actually come and ask me questions because I'm realizing they are giving me the best feedback. They're giving me, the best ideas and things to improve and iterate on, and really just are the most invested in seeing the same things that I want. As an admin, we're very conscious of like we want the tool to work effectively. We don't want people to feel like it's constantly a struggle to use. But when your users are giving you like the feedback you need to make that happen, like you can't ignore it. You got to
Yeah.
work with them. So that's a
Yeah.
huge.
Well done, man. It's like you said, half of the admin job is the data, management and maintenance, and that's
Yeah.
like at the same point, it's almost no one else's job. Like, so all these
Yeah.
people have other jobs that they're graded on, and it's not data maintenance, it's not data governance, it's not
Never
data
is.
modeling.
Find me a
Uh,
sales team. The KPI is they enter the data correctly in the CRM. Because I might
right.
have to go work there because I would love to work in a company where that was a KPI that's measured against salespeople. Nothing
Yeah.
against my salespeople friends, but like they know who they are. It's I'm always like the stress of your manager needs this data in order to give you reporting, so you need to enter this data so he has reporting.
Yeah.
um, but anything we can do to make that easier, I think, is important. And like things like property sync and associated cards really help with that, and just kind of let your teams really live in one place and work. That's what we really want. I think that's really kind of the world HubSpot's trying to get to is like it is a huge platform, but they don't expect any one user to be in the whole platform.
Right.
They expect you to be in like a part of it. Like you're a sales rep, so you're going to live in deals and companies. You're not going to live in tickets. So, if you need something to be updated tickets, like let me make it easy to do from deals so
Yes.
that you can get that done.
For me, like association property list cards are like one of the most amazing updates from this year.
Yeah.
It's really
I want to
connected the
find the
dots.
PM and like give him a hug. I'm like, you saved me countless workflows that I have
I
to
think I
troubleshoot
can. I think I can find them for you.
because it
Uh,
was a game changer when it came out conveniently right when I needed it to.
right. Yeah. Well, this has been a great discussion, and again, it's sometimes it's as simple as like the properties and how the data is moving around and what your team needs in relationship to that. And when you can tweak that just right, like all of a sudden adoption goes from like 10% to 100%.
Yeah.
And everybody's life gets easier and we're having different conversations. And, it's a beautiful thing. So as you see these rollouts and, you know, Understand that you've got a lot of workarounds. You got a lot of options now to remove some of those workarounds. Try to find some opportunities and let's grow. Have a great day, everybody.